fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And for this, I'm doing the 1978, some places say 77, but it was released in, I think, January of 78. And it is the Pyjama Girl case, which it says it's a co-production between Italy and Spain, but it was actually shot in Australia, takes place in Australia, which I think is the only one to do that, and is one of the few gialli, at least that I can think of, that other than places like maybe New York or maybe California, that takes place in a country outside of Europe. So that's interesting. Even though it doesn't use, I mean, it has the Sydney Opera House. Other than that, it could have taken place anywhere. But this one, and yes, this is the Arrow Blu-ray. And of course, even though I'm a fan of older covers, and as neat as this one is, this one fits the film more. Just kind of, yep, there it is. This movie's pretty bland. And it's unfortunate because this does have a lot going for it. There are some standout things because if you think about it, 1978 was, even though there were a number of gialli that came out that year and around that time, gialli was on its way to being dead. Polizia Tedeschi had pretty much taken over and been the dominant Italian genre since 74, 75. Around this time, there really wasn't any good gialli around coming out. There were some, and especially to have one that structure-wise was fairly original, and to be something else I can't think of outside of this one, is that this is a fact-based giallo. It's actually based on a real murder case that went unsolved for, I think it was like 9 or 10 years. I think the murder was actually 1935, 34, and then the killer was found in 44. So 10 years. It was this 10-year-long cold case, and I thought it was going to be okay. It's this idea because it opens up with a woman in yellow pajamas who's found on a beach with a burnt face, and they called her the Pyjama Girl because there was no way to identify her, and that's what the case was known as. I thought it was just going to be that idea, but upon reading into it, the events leading up to it, like who was involved and how it happened, was fairly close. Even the names of the characters sound very much like their real-life counterparts. The investigation, though, because there's also two narratives, which the way it's structured, like I said, is very original as well, and it sucks that a fact-based giallo and one that is structured this way and how it uses its twist, which I like that idea, and I'll get to that after spoilers, obviously, had to be this film because they're not executed very well. There's not a whole lot that I like about this film. I mean, I don't hate it, at least, you know, it's another one that I can say, at least I saw it. But it is fairly boring and just kind of there. But yeah, it was directed by Flavio Margheriti, excuse me, who, that name looks familiar, but I'm not sure if I've actually seen anything by him. He did a film called No, I don't think I've seen any of these. He's actually known for some comedies. So directed by him, written by him, and Rafael Sanchez Campoy, and stars Ray Milland, who's had a long career, along with Mel Ferrer and Delilah Di Lazzaro, who people might recognize from Argento's Phenomena, Michael Placido, who I know I've seen him. Plot of Fear. That was the other. That was the other Giallo I've seen him in. Ray Milland was also in Eaten Alive, Toby Hooper's Eaten Alive, and Lindsay's Nightmare City. Eaten Alive, I still need to see. Howard Ross, Ramiro Oliveros, and the music was done by Ritz Ortolani. And I will say, of all the films he scored, this is probably my least favorite. There are some pieces that I do like how it sounds. Other scenes where I might not like the music, but it fits the scene very well. But all the songs I'm not a fan of. There are songs like with words in them. They're pretty lame. And it does have all different kinds of music. It does have the sort of big, swollen, like the end of the Cannibal Holocaust theme. It does have pieces like that, which I like. But even that turns into like a bass, like a disco bass beat. There's a lot of that in here. Some jazzy stuff. And then, of course, the songs I'm not a big fan of. And so, yeah, it has two narratives, which follows the girl that's found in the investigation. And then this, the other one is of this woman named Linda, which I've seen a few places. What does it say on here? Glenda. Every place but the subtitles says Glenda. It says Linda in the subtitles and in the audio, because I was able to watch it dubbed. I put subtitles on because I had to keep the TV low. But, and also Thompson. His name was put Timpson, and it says Timpson on a few other sites I looked at. Wikipedia says Thompson, subtitles said Timpson. I was going to say Timpson because that's what I knew him as in the movie, but that's Ray Milland. And for the most part, they seem pretty separate, don't have anything to do with each other, but it does come together at the end. And I like how it did that. Again, it could have been very interesting if it was, well, it's still interesting, but, this is one of the most disappointing ones as far as potential-wise. Like, because I look at, okay, they're taking a fact-based story, they're sticking to it fairly well, or at least half of it, I'm guessing. And the way it's structured and how it pays off at the end, if this was done well or done right, this would have been top-tier Giallo, I feel. But it wasn't. But it's about Linda. I'm calling her Linda. I don't think she's from Australia. I think she's from somewhere else, but she's in Australia, and she's in this sort of love square where she has her husband, Antonio, who's an Italian immigrant, a waiter, and a student, a German immigrant named Roy, who's a glass worker, and then a doctor named Henry, who's played by Mel Ferrer. And so eventually she marries Antonio, but she still, she has Roy pretty much for sexual needs. She has Dr. Henry because he's loaded. I mean, she has sex with all of them, but Roy seems to be the real, that seems to be why she keeps him around. And it does make Antonio out to be sort of unhinged. Like, he knows what she's up to, but she acts like a victim. There's not much respect to be had with this character because she does act like a victim, and at times I think we're supposed to feel sorry for her. I, I don't. Even the parts where at first I thought it was a miscarriage. Then later on, he says his baby lived for 3 days, so I'm guessing it was SIDS. That's not really a spoiler. I mean, I will be able to be a little bit more loose with spoilers on this one because there are a lot of things that kind of go nowhere. But Inspector Thompson, played by Ray Milland, he's retired, but he's really bored. He has this desire to get back to solving cases, and that's right after the Pyjama Girl was found on the beach. And I'll say the effects on the burnt face are okay. I mean, we don't really see them that much. She is burnt just on the face, some on her hands, and a couple of areas like on her thighs and shins, which eventually she is splayed out like this publicly in a glass case, which I'll get to. But so his former superior says, okay, you can work on the case in an unofficial capacity. But Taylor and Morris, these two younger guys who are more contemporary and by the books, modern books, whereas Timpson is more about the, he has old school methods. So while they're trying to get like a profile made on the killer, he's taken the Chinese silk pajamas and the sack that she was found in and is going off that to build the case. Eventually, the superior decides, since they have no way of really identifying the girl, and I don't remember where they do it, but they do put her in this glass case for the public to see. And there's this very long scene with this sort of disco beat that I don't think worked very well. There was some ominous tones put over it at times with this long montage of people up close as they look at her. Some people gasping or fainting or observing. And then this one woman approaches and says, oh, because of that, I can prove it. This is my daughter, Anna Philomena, which for 10 years, they thought that was the identity of the Pyjama Girl in real life. It was her and this one other girl. But you find out she's a fraud. Her daughter's still alive, and she has a $100,000 insurance policy on her. So whenever there's an accident or like an unrecognizable victim, she always tries to claim it. Also, the major red herring, the one big red herring that they have throughout the whole film is this guy named Quint, this big bearded guy who lives on the beach. I guess he's the guy that pulls cars, junked cars on the beach, which is what she was found in. He's a known creep, and they really, because they tried to say that the Pyjama Girl was raped because there was signs of sexual intercourse. She wasn't raped. Spoiler. And when they go to question him, we see him beaten off to girls on the beach. He's a known creep to do that. This one of his neighbor ladies had a watch. They go to question her. Her daughter gives them a watch, saying, Quint gave this to her last night when they saw each other. Turns out it fits the tan line on the girl's wrist. So they think Quint's the guy that did it. And this is all like in the first hour. And then Timpson gets a tip saying that he's gonna go meet the killer. He's like, I think you have the wrong guy. I'm gonna go meet the real killer. And I will give one spoiler. Of course, since it's that early in the film, there's like 42 minutes left. Since he says he's gonna go confront the killer and he's confident in who it is, he gets killed. By who exactly, I'm not sure. If they say, I must have missed it. I think I know who it is because there is an allusion earlier on. Because there is a scene with Linda, she's in a car with someone, and the glove, it shows there's a gun in the glove box. So I think it was him. But, you know, and from there, it kind of shifts. Because the first hour, it was fairly even going back and forth between the investigation and her troubled love life. But then, after that mark where Timpson gets killed, and it does suck because he was the best character. He was the character that, one, was the most interesting to see on screen. Like, he did have some good, he did have a lot of good quips. Like, he made jokes to Quint. He goes to see the former husband of the lady claiming the pajama girl was her daughter. And the ex-husband is the Giallo quirky character because he's got a ton of birds. He's sitting around half naked. He's very flamboyant. But, so yeah, when he gets killed off, it does get... It gets less interesting in the fact that there's no characters you really care about. They're all... Yeah, not very respectable people. But it does pick up in the sense that you can tell where it's going and what's leading up to it. And it's very heavy on her story. I mean, eventually she leaves. Antonio wants to leave with Henry, and this is after the miscarriage, and it's proven that he is kind of violent and mean. Especially when he says, you can stop working on the ferry and come work with me and you'll make more money. Which I will say that was a well-orchestrated scene. Plus the scene, well, actually it's the same music. When they leave the hospital, when they find out the baby died, there is this good Ritz Ortolani score that's put over it, and it keeps building and building. So then when they're in their apartment, and he's saying, oh, you can quit your job there, come work with me, because he has a crappy apartment right by a street light. The bedroom lights up red and green. And as he's talking, the dialogue gets quieter, the music builds up, and there's this bass line behind it that gets faster as if to show like her anxiety. But yeah, being a waitress is her final straw, and decides to leave him for Dr. Henry, which she kind of has regards about, which she tells him, so she doesn't know what to do, and she does some more questionable things. So, getting into spoilers will be fairly easy, but yeah, I don't know if this will be a rant, maybe mildly. It's not that I dislike it, it's more that I'm disappointed because, I mean, I even went into it with low expectations because I've heard not that many great things about it. And from what I've heard, people that have seen it say it's one of, if not their least favorite, Giallo. But, which also, I mean, it even has Giallo in the title because the Italian title is Girl with the Yellow Pajamas. And there is a theme of yellow. Yellow just pop up a lot in the film. The most meaningful is like the very final scene in the fact that she was in yellow pajamas. But yeah, even though it's kind of bland, not a lot of people you care about. Music is the whole composition isn't that great, save for a few decent pieces. Doesn't completely utilize its setting uh, very often, save for the opera house. And it does have some plot points that lead to nothing. Feels like it's just there either for, you know, uh, running time fodder or, I don't know, just because. It does kind of drag, and it's 102 minutes. This is one that definitely could have been closer to the 90-minute mark. But the thing that does make me see the potential is I love how it's structured, how it leads up to the twist, even though there is no big reveal. It just kind of happens. Like you just kind of, oh, now I get it. It's one of those, which is another reason why it's disappointing. And the fact that it's a fact-based Giallo, which if I were to see more of those, it would have been on very obscure, like regional cases like this, not big major cases because that would make it too obvious. So this isn't one that I can recommend too highly. Only the biggest of Giallo fans I'd recommend this to. If you're a fan of true crime, I wouldn't really look into it either because it's not really, even though the murder itself is, and the motives and how it happened and even the names of the characters are very similar, it's not like you learn a whole lot about the real life case. So yeah, only I can only recommend this to people that have to see like every Giallo. So, but I am kind of torn on how I feel about it. It's not that I disliked it. Again, even with my low expectations, I still was disappointed because I see the potential. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers, so. There is a point earlier on in the film when Linda is talking to Dr. Henry, and she mentions her friend Evelyn, which I will say, when she says how they were together, Evelyn said she didn't want to go home, or so she like made love to her, so she would have, or something like that. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't really go anywhere. There's one thing that makes Evelyn relevant to the entire story after that. But when that one scene with Evelyn is showing, that is some style that I'll say, okay, that actually looks decent because it's very out of focus, kind of dreamlike around the edges of the screen. And it's when she's in Dr. Henry's car. I don't know if it's that scene particular, but the glove box shows a pistol. So I thought he was the one that killed Timpson, but it more than likely was one of the two other guys, Roy or Antonio, because later on, when she's talking to Henry about Evelyn, she says she got this package from L.A., which is where Evelyn is, and she just kind of holds it up like, yeah, she sent me these. And then they're just talking, and you can tell it's yellow pajamas. It's very subtle. It's almost just like it's not a big reveal, which sometimes that is the best way for a twist to work. But when you have two narratives that are, well, I don't know if I could say that. Maybe if this was a more interesting and better executed film, a twist can be revealed that subtly. And it's the wrong one. I was thinking, I just held that up for effect. I was thinking, like, what if it is structured like her story is the past and it's leading up to the murder? But I wasn't 100% sure. I just thought, it's a possibility. Of course, that is what happened. Linda is the girl in the yellow pajamas. And it was definitely seen for sure when she shows the pajamas to Dr. Henry. And when Timpson was killed, we see him making a recording when he says, this is for Inspector Morris. I'm going to see the pajama girl killer tonight. Of course, that's when he gets killed. We don't see what's on the rest of it. But there's this young girl that lives in the same building as him. We see her in the very beginning of the film, and then we see her trying to call Morris a couple times. And at the end, she sees Morris outside. She gives him these packages that contains the audio reels and I want to say it was like a shock for his RV, a big auto part with blood on it, the murder weapon. But then we see that Morris is listening to it with, Taylor and Roy. They brought in Roy. And that's when it plays in its entirety. And it explains what we had already seen, which is when she ran off to be with Dr. Henry and she left Antonio for good, and she realized that she can't go to him right away and he might not even want her to be with him full time, even though he proposed it. She's at this diner and this guy starts talking to her, and she just proposes $100 for you and your friend at the same time to have me. She offers to sell herself. And so it's him, his friend, and his 13-year-old nephew. They go to this hotel, and so she can make money because now she's homeless. And she stole Roy's RV, which was his home. When her and the three guys are going up the hotel room stairs, it's in slow motion. The music does go with it. Of course, the lighting is yellow. I think the walls were yellow. When she gets to the actual room, the bed covers are yellow. And she's just crying the whole time. I mean, it's not shot very well. It is a very dirty feeling scene. Also, it keeps going back and forth between showing her crying and the young nephew crying. He said he was a church boy. It just keeps going back and forth. And the music does have this kind of, even though it's like a disco bass beat, it does have this sort of anxious kind of rhythm that builds up with this ominous sort of like violation sound over it. It might not be shot very well. The idea is there, have that kind of off-putting, anxious music, and the feelings it was trying to evoke were partly there, but it wasn't shot very well, and it wasn't quite there. But Roy and Antonio decide, okay, stole all our stuff, including emptying out Antonio's, her stuff from their place. Roy's RV, they decide to go get it back. Roy knows that she's been seeing this doctor who lives like 100 miles away. And eventually, they stop. They find the RV. They stop. Antonio goes in there. He starts slapping her around. Well, first, he starts packing her stuff. And she's calling him a loser, a jerk. Why would I want to be with you? You're a failure. And finally, he snaps and slaps her. And then she starts crying and saying, like, how could you? You've hurt me. It's like, even though I don't condone any of that, it's like, she was basically poking the lion and then crying when she got bit. She was playing the victim. But then the door bursts open and there's a struggle. She has a pistol and they're like struggling with it. And then it shows Roy in the car and there's a gunshot. When he gets out, she walks out of the RV, so you think, oh, okay, she shot Antonio. But then she collapses and there was a hole in her neck. Antonio is so traumatized that he even pisses himself. And so that's when, you know, Morris gets the package with the reels. They listen to it. They bring Roy in. And as it's playing, we see the aftermath of that scene, which was Roy loaded her up in the trunk. She was still alive, so he clubbed her, drove around till he got to the beach, then dumped her, left set her on fire. Which, I did forget to mention, Quinn in the watch, he did find her, was wearing the watch, and didn't say anything. That's the end of Quinn's story. So then when Antonio calls and says he wants to give himself up, please come alone, Taylor goes. He's at the cemetery where his son is buried. But of course, when Taylor gets there, the whole cavalry comes in. Antonio gets upset and he runs away. Eventually runs into traffic and a bus hits him. A bus with, like a girls' band, like a school band, marching band. And the bus is yellow. I will say, of all the yellow that's in this movie, the fact that she was killed in yellow pajamas and he was hit by a yellow bus, those are the two that's most connected and probably the most meaningful. Everything else is probably just there because, yellow, Giallo. She was in yellow pajamas, so here's the theme. But to me, the most important one was the bus. And I do like how, which his name was Antonio Antolini, which plot-wise, I was thinking of Godfather Part 2, even though it's structured different. But Vito's father is Antonio Andolini, so it's very close. But the killer in real life, once they were found out, his name was Tony, where is it? His name actually was Tony. His name was different, but it was close. Agostini. So, that's what I mean by their, he lived at the end, which I'm actually not even sure if he died at the end. He seemed hurt on the ground, but kind of with it. But he was found guilty of manslaughter, served 6 years, died in 1969 after being deported. That's the real life story. Here it ends after he's hit by the bus. So the thing I like most about it is, okay, we have these two narratives that seem to be happening concurrently and they're unrelated. But then through that twist, we find out one is the events leading up to the murder that the other narrative is trying to solve. I love that idea. It's a great way to go about the Giallo formula. Unfortunately, it had to be the Pyjama Girl case. And yeah, the best character was killed off an hour in with like 40 some odd minutes left. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to put rant. Maybe I'll just put, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to put rant or not, but it's definitely a contender for an honorable mention of my top 10 worst. I don't know if it would make the list of top 10, certainly an honorable mention. Even though, like, if the structure and the twist had been not been like this would have just felt like a cookie cutter Giallo that happened to be fact based. But since I do like how the formula was tested with the structure, it does add points. And since the movie was just a bland cookie cutter Giallo otherwise, this could have just been a forgettable entry that I've seen. But yeah, it's definitely a disappointing film. So that's 1978's Pyjama Girl Case. I do have at least 5 more Giallo to get to, and then I'll be doing all the Argento films that I haven't got to yet, which there's at least 4 or 5 Gialli in that group to get to. Maybe one more if I'm able to get it. But anyways, stay tuned for all those. And and also let me know if you do want to see some more anthologies before October is over. But anyway, thank you for watching.